Hello my friends, and welcome back to my painting channel. And in today's video I'm going to be painting Wilhelm Chaney, which is the Blood Bowl star player for the undead Blood Bowl team. This is a werewolf star player, and he is a really cool model. Very different kind of character with loads and loads of detail. So, because this one's a little bit different, we don't have skin tones, we're going to start by painting all of the fur. So for this one, I'm going to paint him slightly different. We're going to give him sort of like a little bit of a different colour fur. We're not going for like a dark grey, we're not going for a dark brown or a black or anything like that. I'm going to paint him sort of like a khaki and then build that up into sort of like a kind of snowy colour, I guess. So we're going to start off with the Vallejo khaki colour. And I'm going to cover the whole model, all of the fur in that colour to begin with. And then I'm going to move on and we're going to use a Vallejo orange brown. So the person that I'm painting this for, my friend, was saying that he would like me to just be close to the box art but not entirely the same. So we're going to paint him slightly different just to have my own little take on it. Now, orange brown is a great base colour from Vallejo because this allows us to tone up to a nice bright orange, nice and quick and easily. This isn't something that takes ages. This is something that we'll be able to build up in a very quick manner. This is also good because I'm sticking to a lot of earth tones on this model, which means that with this particular model I'll be able to get away with putting a single wash on the model and building up from there, and it'll tie all of the colours together quite nicely. So once the orange brown is dry, you want to be careful and just put a nice colour of black across all of the leather areas. So the glove, the leather straps, the belt, the leather strap across his knee guard and things like that. And don't forget the dog collar as well. So just want to be careful as possible not to get the black onto other things, but because they're only base coats, it doesn't matter too much. You can always fix any mistakes. Now, once that's dried as well, I'm going to paint the trousers in a dark military green from Vallejo as well. And again, the good thing with this is earth colours. We're going to keep all of these tones quite earthy, and we're going to keep the theme quite earthy and quite close as well. So just being careful with the legs, because the legs are quite difficult to get your brush into, especially around by the tail area as well. And then we're going to move on and just do the metals for this one. I'm going to do a scorpion brass. So I'm using a Citadel scorpion brass. I'm going to weather these a little bit later using sort of like a verdigris and things like that. So we're going to build the brass tone and the brass layer up first, and then we'll come across that later. Good thing is with the brass, again, it's quite earthy, so the tone will tone quite nicely in a little bit. Just making sure to cover all of the metals with this. So the shoulder guard, this really cool sort of like shoulder guard here, where this comes out like a big sort of dragon wing as well. That's really cool, so we're going to cover that in the same as well. Now for the ball, this is probably one of my favourite things, is with this particular model, instead of having the ball in his hands, he's jumping and catching the ball in his mouth, which looks incredible. So for the ball, I'm going to paint this a little bit of a different colour. So I'm using the Vallejo red leather, and the reason why I'm painting it that colour is because, again, it gives you a slight different tone to the orange brown and things like that. I'm also quickly just going to put a layer of rosy flesh in between the skin areas of the ears, and then once I've done that, I'm moving on to doing a bone white across the bone area. So there's a skull just on his chest, and then he's got like a bandage around his foot, and there's also a bandage just around the back of his tail, and of course I'm doing the claws and nails and the teeth the same colour. So there we go, that's the bandage just across the tail area here. Just trying to be careful here not to get the bone white across any of the trousers, being as we've spent so much time getting all of these base coats correct. There we go. Just trying to be as careful as possible with the teeth as well, because the teeth are particularly small. Again, because this is only base coats, we can fix any mistakes here quite easily. So don't worry too much. Just try to be as careful as possible. And from there, I'm using a dead white. You can use like an off-white or just a normal white if you want. And I'm just painting white into the eye sockets, ready for when we put the wash on. It's easier to paint the eyes in first before you put your washes in, and then you can always fix them up later if you need to. I'm also using the dead white to paint all of the stitches just on the glove as well, just on the gauntlet here. And again, this is just so that I've got the base colours ready so that I can tone them back up. I'm also going to use the same colour across the stitches, just across the ball, across the top here. And then for one final colour, we're just going to use a gunmetal. There's a little bit of metal just holding on around the skull here, and there's also a little bit of metal in the belt buckle, and there's also a small buckle as well on the dog collar. So just being careful to get the gunmetal across all of those areas. And then I'm just going to focus a very, very small amount of black just in the eye area here. And then one more, just going to paint just across the trouser leg, and you could pick any colour you like. I'm just using an olive green from AK Interactive because I thought this was a really nice bright colour green to go over the top of that military green. And once all of that's done and we've got all of the base coats, I'm going to cover this all in a single wash. I'm going to cover this all in an Agrax Earthshade, so this is all going to be covered in a nice earthy tone as well. So again, this Agrax Earthshade is like a dark brown colour, so this is going to complement all of those earthy tones that we've got. So the khaki is quite earthy, again with the military green, the orange brown, even the metallic that we're using, the brass scorpion and things like that. Now he is standing on a human player's helmet, so depending on what colours you've painted your human teams will depend on what colour you paint the helmet. I simply opted for blue purely just because blue is a nice, even, simple colour for the human teams. But you could paint the helmet underneath whatever colour you like. Now once we've done all of that and we've waited for that shade to dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid dry brushing. This is a brave move and it takes absolutely ages to paint. Now this is completely up to you. If you want, you can dry brush all of the hair. It will give you a cool effect and it will give you a really quick and easy finish to doing this. Personally, I wanted to try and paint this. I wanted to give myself a challenge to build up that character and hand paint all of the fur. So this took me a long time. And as you can see, I'm using a detailed brush and I'm using a nice thin down colour of this khaki. And I'm just painting this around the face, but I'm also painting all of those fur points individually as well. With the face, as you can see, I'm just trying to build up the character while leaving that shade in all of those recessed points as well. And once you start building the layers up on the face, you realise just how much character there is in this particular model's face. There's quite a lot more to it than you'd think. It actually looks quite cartoony as well for a Games Workshop model. It's a really cool model. So once you've gone around and you painted all of the fur, or dry brushed all of the fur, whichever is your preference, I'm then using the first step up. Now for this I'm switching to AK Interactive paints from the bellow, and I'm using first a light earth colour. And this is a really good lighter tone to that khaki, and this builds up the first step, and this is really nice. And as you can see, I'm focusing a lot around the face here, just to give you an idea as to how this sort of builds that tone and builds that sort of highlight around that colour that we've already used. Now again, if you want to, you can dry brush this if you'd prefer. Personally, I've gone in and tried to paint all of this by hand. Like I say, it did take me a long time. It is quite intensive. It does take a lot of focus. It does take a lot of your time. So if you're planning on painting this as a really cool star player that you really want to show off, doing it this way really does do that, because you can see the effort that you've put in. But if it's just like rank and file, just a normal guy to be part of the team, then I suppose you can paint how you like anyway. So dry brushing is equally as cool. But like I say, I just opted to do something a little bit different. So once I've done that, as the first stage using the light earth, we're then going to use another AK Interactive paint, and we're going to use vampiric flesh. And again, this now is the perfect step up. So this is a very similar colour, but much lighter. So this is giving us a much brighter vibrancy to that fur, and especially around that face. And as I said earlier, you can see that character building in the face now. You can see that kind of that sort of cartoony effect, you know, sort of building out as we build in those tones and build in those colours up. And it's starting to look really cool already, and that's before we've even sort of built up the colours on the rest of the model as well. So yeah, just take your time. If you plan on painting all of the furs, personally I would suggest doing them in stages. So do like the left arm, then go onto the right arm, do the face first, then onto the one leg at a time, just purely because it gives you something more to like focus. Each stage and each step that you complete, then it gives you sort of more drive that you want to move on to the next area. If you try doing it all in one sitting, it is quite energy sapping. So if you enjoy a bit of caffeine with your painting, make sure to have a nice cup of coffee before you get started. This does take, as I say, quite a bit of time. It's worth it in the end though, because he looks amazing. So once we've used all of the, once we've painted all of the fur and we've used up quite a lot of our energy doing so, we're going to move on and we're going to paint up then the other colours. So starting back with that orange brown. So again, I'm using those thin layers and those thin coats, and I'm just building this around sort of the folds of the cloth and things like that. Now the cool thing is that Agrax Earthshade is a really nice natural tone to this, because as I say, we're using earthy colours, so the browns and the wash and everything like that is going to tie together quite nicely. So I'm going to avoid using or putting the new colour, the brighter colour, into any of those recess points, and that's going to allow us to create those folds and create that depth to those folds in a really simple and quick way. As you can see, I'm just trying to catch all of the raised points as much as I can, and I'm just pretty much following around the model, you know, just following around where those raised areas are, where those folds are, how those folds fall on the model and things like that. So again, using the detail brush, we're just trying to build that up, and as you can see, the tones that I'm using, or the layers that I'm using, they're nice and thin paint, so that allows us to give 2 or 3 layers onto the model as well, so we can build that vibrancy as we go. And from there, we're going to mix the orange brown and a bright orange colour. Now, bright orange is very, very bright, so I've had to tone this one down slightly. So we're using the orange brown by about 70%, and then only about 30% if it is the bright orange. So in other words, I put a little bit in and allowed that to sort of build up and check the vibrancy before I put it onto the model as well. And then, of course, the most natural step up then would be to use half and half. So we're using 50% of the orange brown and 50% of the bright orange as well. And this is giving us that nice vibrant boost and giving us the next step up in terms of highlighting as well. Now, if you wanted to, you could always go just for the bright orange and add sort of edge highlights and things like that. That's completely up to you, and if you go just for the bright orange on its own after this layer, that does make a really cool step up once more, but that's personal choice, you know, it's up to you. So we're going to do something similar now just on his shorts here. So we're going to go back to the military green, and we're just going to paint this around, again being careful with the fur and being careful where we paint this. So we're going to try and keep that shade and that wash in the recess points, especially around the creases, as you can see, and I'm just going to paint the colour as much as I can just around some of the harder to reach areas, so just around where the creases go around the front here, and just where the folds are, especially because one of those legs is lifted. He's got a lot of creases just down the one side, as you can see. So we're going to try and keep the shade in those recess points and keep the shade in that area. And as you can see, my brush strokes are sort of following along the miniature, so that this adds to the dynamism and adds to the character of the miniature as well, and the way that is built up. So nice and simple, nice and easy. Take your time and sort of enjoy it. As you can see, I'm using that really sort of detailed, thinned down detailed brush as well. So we're just building this in stages, nice thin paints. And there we go. Once the military green is dried down, then we're going to mix in a medium olive. So we're going to go for, again, half and half. So this one's going to be 50-50. So we're using 50% of the military green and 50% of the medium olive. And we're going to build this up, and we're going to use nice thin coats. Now the medium olive is a great vibrant colour. So this is going to allow us to use those thin layers and glaze this up. And we're going to build our vibrancy through. And this colour blends really nicely down into the base coat, so the military green, and this is going to add that vibrancy without sort of looking unnatural. So this is going to blend nicely into the model. As you can see, the layer that I put originally is starting to blend in already, and you can see that it's starting to boost that vibrancy. So there you can see that vibrancy has been boosted, and what I'm going to do now is just use a little bit more of a selective colour with my more detailed brush. And this time I'm using just the medium olive on its own. And again, with those thin colours and with that nice glazed down tone, this is going to allow me to build that vibrance and just gently grow that vibrance up through that model, just like so. And again, I'm being a little bit more selective here, so picking the areas that I want around the creases and things like that. So again, just following sort of the miniature, following the way the miniature is built and sort of the character that's already there. And the more that you use this sort of colour as a glaze, the more you can build that vibrance as well. So this is like a really, really nice colour to go across the top. As you can see, the vibrance of that medium olive looks really, really nice. And once that's done, just going to go back to that olive green that we used originally from the AK Interactive, just down the middle of the trousers, so just down the marking, just down the centre. And as you can see, because we've used our medium olive now on the above the military green, when we put this olive green back on top, it's going to really tie those colours, really tie those greens together, so it looks like sort of they belong together. It's really, really good colour. And once that's done, I'm going to try and go, we're going to go back to the metals. So we're going to go back to that scorpion brass. And what we're going to do with the scorpion brass is I'm going to use this as a stippling effect. So I'm just using the tip of the brush and I'm just dabbing the colour back on. Why I'm using a stippling effect is because when you're using a stippling effect, it does create sort of a tonal texture instead of like painting and dragging your brush around. And because it's metals, we kind of want them to be a little bit rougher. And it also allows us to avoid painting the metals into the recessed points where the shade is sat. So we're just going to use that, stippling that around the model where the metals are, and then I'm going to mix in a little bit of a combination. So we're using the Citadel Scorpion Brass with a Vallejo polished gold, and the polished gold is a vibrant, bright gold. So by putting half of each together, this is going to give that Scorpion Brass a little bit of a colour boost, a little bit of a vibrance pop. And this is really cool because this is going to give us, as I say, a little bit more of a vibrance boost, as you can see with that really cool sort of dragon wing here. Now, as I said earlier, we're going to make this into a really cool sort of worn out brass. So I'm just using the Verdigris Glaze from Vallejo. You can also use Nihilic Oxide from Citadel. It's practically the same thing. But ideally what you want to do is use less is more as the motto for this, and just place this in sort of dabs. Again, I'm using that stippling effect, so I'm just dabbing this in areas that I want the sort of effect and the weathering to look. So we kind of want to put this in areas, but without covering all of the models. So we're just kind of placing it in bits where we kind of want it to look a little bit worn and run down. And once it dries down, it does dry down in this really cool sort of like chalky weathered effect. It's a really, really cool effect. So moving on to doing the leathers. The leathers, I have a very quick and easy way of doing the leathers, just using the AK Interactive set. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll see that I painted like this previously. So you start with the leather brown as a base, you go over the black colours and over the black tones with that. Then you use a half and half mixture of the leather brown and the deep brown together, like so. And with this one you become a little bit more selective and you get quite scratchy and a little bit rougher because you want the leathers to be a little bit more worn and a little bit more beaten up. And as you go, you just kind of progress and you kind of build those scratches and build that sort of texture. As you can see, I'm being really scratchy, being really sort of like selective as to where I'm putting this colour, so that it's not one flat tone, it's not one flat colour. But it does have a really great vibrance boost onto that leather then as well. As you can see, it's already starting to make that gauntlet boost and the vibrance is already there. So you can be kind of as selective as you like, you could be as careful as you like, you could be as you could tone it out as much as you like. And once that's done, you're just going to use the deep brown on its own. And with this now, you're going to be really selective. So with this, I normally use just to catch the edges of the belt, and I normally put like little scratchy sort of like effects and little sort of scratches and things through the middle of the belt as well, because that kind of adds to the worn out effect and the worn out look, and kind of creates that kind of beaten and battered sort of used broken leather kind of effect as well. So as you can see, I'm going to try to do the same just on here on the gauntlet, just to give you an idea. So I'm starting off by going just down like a little bit of a basic sort of like edge highlight, I guess, and I'm just going to bring that out and drag that out in scratches. And you don't have to be perfect with this, you don't have to be uniform. That's the cool thing with like all the scratches and stuff. You can just kind of drag your brush in different ways, and then that creates that texture and that element of like worn out, beaten out, broken sort of leathers and stuff like that. It's really, really cool, easy to do effect, and it's something that that looks great when it's done as well. So once that's done, then we're going to quickly go back and do the ball. So back to the red leather, and we're just going to be nice and selective and nice and careful where we place this, because we don't want to get this into the teeth and into the fur and everything like that we've spent a lot of time getting right. So we're just going to be very, very selective using this red leather across the ball, as you can see. And then once that's done, I'm using the red leather and a bone white half and half mixture again, and again just using stippling and scratches and things like that to kind of create a bit of a texture onto the ball as well. There we go, just being very selective where I'm placing this, trying to make it more textured towards the corners and the edges of the ball. And then sticking with that bone white, we're going to use just the bone white on its own to do the skull. I'm just going to be careful to get the bone white across as much of the skull as we can. So just picking out those details, as you can see, the cheekbones, the top of the skull and all bits like that. And the teeth as well, which was probably one of the more difficult areas to catch. Those teeth are quite detailed. There is a little bit of you do need to focus a little bit to get in there. So take your time with doing the teeth and try to use a detailed brush as much as possible. And there we go, just building that bone white colour up. Don't forget as well with the bone white to make sure to go across the bandages, just across the foot and across the tail on the back as well. Just being as selective as possible, and again just using sort of like scratches and things like that with a nice thin down paint as well. It's going to allow some of the colour below and some of that shade below to show through as well, creating that texture. And then once you've done that, just using a highlighted colour. Elfic Flesh from Vallejo is a perfect colour to go on top of the bone white. This is a very similar sort of colour, but this one is much more vibrant, so this allows bones and things like that to really pop, but without being a white colour, which is great, because then that gives you the option, should you want to be really edge highlight or put little scratches and little marks and things with just a pure white colour on top as well. So that just creates another element of detail and texture and things like that with your miniature as well. And I'm also going to add that just onto the claws and the nails and things like that as well. Don't forget to do things like the teeth and bits with this colour, because that's where the vibrance and that's where the character and the texture and things like that are going to come through as well. And once that point is done, we're just going to go on with a plain flat white colour. So you can use the dead white that we used originally, or you can go straight to just a straight white. And then we're going to pick out all of those stitches. So we're going to pick out the stitches on the gauntlet here, and we're also going to pick out the stitches on the ball as well, just across the top. But we're going to be very careful not to get the white on the ball, so we're just going to try and pick out those stitches as much as we can. And then for the final stage, we're just going to build up that silver. So a nice simple silver colour from Vallejo. So instead of using the gunmetal, we're using a silver now, which is a much brighter, more vibrant silver. We're just going to dab that across some of the edges and just create a little bit of a worn silver sort of look, where this will catch the light and catch the colour. And when everything is all done and everything is all finished, you should have something that looks like this. This is my Wilhelm Chaney model, and I hope that you've enjoyed my colour scheme, and I hope that you've enjoyed my painting video. As always, my friends, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching and your comments. I really do appreciate it. I will see you guys on the next one.